So interesting front cover, isn't it? There it is. How a Jehovah's Witness brain works. Maybe the people who made this kingdom wisdom, they call themselves, although we never really get to see anybody, do we? It's all narrated in an AI generated voice, and but maybe they've been a Jehovah's Witness and so they know how the Jehovah's Witness mind works. Interesting, wouldn't it, to find out? Because how would you know unless you've been one? So let's assume that they've been one. And one of the problems is apparently we're gaslit, brainwashed, because of the way the teaching is repetitive. You see, when we have a watchtower study, we read the paragraph and then we make an answer. Well, actually, if you go back to high school, do you remember reading? The teacher may get you to read some essays or something, and then they'll talk about it in class, and then they'll often set homework where they'll want you to write out an essay, won't they, as homework. Now that's the kind of thing that Jehovah's Witnesses do with their children, and they do in their meetings. When they're studying the Watchtower, they'll read a bit, and then they'll put their hands up and they'll answer, and they'll refer to verses in Scripture. Some are referenced, and if you want to add, you add your own thoughts and comments, and maybe another Bible verse that would be appropriate. That the whole class, in this case, those in the meeting, the church meeting, the Jehovah's Witnesses call it the Kingdom Hall, they all benefit, rather like if they've gone back to college or school. I mustn't mention college, must I? Because Jehovah's Witnesses don't let you go. I remember going to college in 2001. I spent a little bit of time at university in 2003. I don't remember any real problems. Anyway, we're talking about the brain. How does it work? Now, if someone's gaslit, this happened to me actually, I believe. I've made a video actually on my other channel, Gaz channel, where I talk about Putin. It's Gaz's opinions, and I mentioned about Putin that I felt that he was going to not be the ruler in Russia by Christmas. I thought he was out because I watched a whole load of kind of news videos on the YouTube. They catch your eye, don't they? You get some enlightening piece of news. It's convinced me that Russia was being destroyed by the rockets from Ukraine and the way they were fighting, and that the Russian economy was about to collapse. And then just the other day I started watching some YouTube videos, obviously produced by others who are more sympathetic to Russia, and it seemed to make me think, well, maybe I've made a video, made a big mistake, maybe I've been brainwashed. It's very easily done with the news, isn't it? You see, the people in Russia, they get a completely different news report than we do in the West. And this is one of the problems, you see. It just reminded me of a scripture, you see. So this big claim that people are gaslit and brainwashed, well, you could say that that's what they're doing in education in our schools, that you're being gaslit and brainwashed to believe a certain teaching, really. But there has to be a method of teaching, hasn't there? This is a comment that the Apostle Paul made in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 3 and 4. He says this. He says, in fact, the good news we declare is veiled. So veiled, the message wasn't getting through. It's veiled amongst those who are perishing, among whom the God of this system of things or world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers, so that the illumination of the glorious good news about the Christ, who's the image of God, might not shine through. And even Jesus himself, when he preached to people, he found that he couldn't get the point across, even when he did miracles. Not everybody was convinced that he was the Messiah. You had scribes and Pharisees and wealthy people, even though they saw or heard about his miracles, they said, oh, he's doing the miracles by means of Beelzebub, which is kind of the spirits or Satan. So even the people then, their minds had been brainwashed against receiving the glorious good news of the Christ, the gospel. You might say, oh, you haven't used that awful Jehovah's Witness Bible. It was, do you know, it was produced by unqualified men. But then the Jewish religious leaders, the Sanhedrin, which is like the Synod of the Church of England, the Anglican Church, or the cardinals who vote the Pope in, the qualified cardinals, it's like saying that they, the Jewish equivalent, the Synod, the 70 member Sanhedrin said, who are these men? And it was Peter, James and John, wasn't it? In Acts chapter 2. Who are these men that preaching about that Christ? He's gone. He's just a man. They follow a man. They're cultists. It's a sect, the sect of Peter. And then they said, they're not qualified. They're unqualified and unlettered. Who are they? So they only seem to want to recognise people who display all their qualifications, who are part of the elaborate system. Now you might say to me, well, you shouldn't have quoted that awful Jehovah's Witness Bible. They're not qualified. Really? Qualified in what way? And so let's quote from the King James, because the King James, of course, some people say this is the only Bible you should follow, and fair enough. It's got it's the main Bible version that Jehovah's Witnesses used to get their beliefs. Of course, it wasn't their own Bible that was produced in 2013 or even 1984 or even in 1960. Before then, they only had the American Standard Version Bible, and Christians' Bibles like this one. And this one says, it says the same thing. It says, let me get the verse right. Here it is. But if our gospel is hid, it is hid to them who are lost, to whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believeth not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who's the image of God, should shine unto them. Later on it talks about shining onto their hearts, interestingly. You might say, well, so I'll have a reference another one. But did you notice that they, the people, the general people, have been blinded by the God of this system, the God of this world? This is what this man Keir calls Westcott Bible commentary. And what it has the verses, and then it has their commentary. It explains the Greek and the meanings. So on this point it says, 4 verse 4, turn the page over, get it right. It says, if our gospel is hid, it is hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. Sounds very much the same as the last two versions I've read, doesn't it? Now this is what they have to say about more of it. It says here, the veil that blinded the Jewish mind has now become the veil that Satan uses to blind the perishing. Satan is here is called the God of this age. According to the Greek, the word image is twice elsewhere applied to Christ. The verb shine is found only here in the New Testament, that the glorious good news might shine forth. So onto people's hearts. So some would respond and some wouldn't. Some would be so brainwashed, so gaslit, that they wouldn't be able to get the message. It wouldn't focus, it wouldn't register, you couldn't get through. And Jehovah's Witnesses know this when they preach the good news. So how do Jehovah's Witnesses' brains work? Well, they work just as children's brains work when they're at school. Yes, you can be indoctrinated, and yes, some have been brought up in the religion and it's just a religion. They haven't dedicated their life properly to the Creator, they've dedicated themselves to an organisation, and eventually they've left. And some of them have made these really insulting videos. So there it is. I'm making a couple more on this. Thank you very much. Take care and do subscribe, because at least you'll get something biblical in the response. There's all these videos that are coming out. When do they open up the Bible? In fact, this Bible here, the NIV, Christendom's favourite Bible, basically, or Protestant Christendom's favourite Bible, I've used it 300-400 times, and look at it. Look. That King James is like 60 years old. It's been used hundreds of thousands of times, and look at this. It's falling apart already. And interestingly, it says about that scripture, interestingly, it just begins with a question mark, as though maybe it's not true. So this religion that's not been designed to be used, this Bible, so maybe a lot of these born-again Christians, they never really look at the Bible, study it properly. Maybe they don't. Let's have a look. It just says this. Very, very briefly. 2 Corinthians 4:4, the same verse 3, it says, and even if our gospel, even if, well, maybe we don't have to preach the gospel. So, Christendom's Bible, where they took the name of God out of it, and it's falling apart. So, tell me who are the experts? Thank you very much. Take care. Interesting news about the Anglican Church, isn't it? It's split, apparently. One is a lady now, and one, of course, you've still got as King Charles III, the head of the church. Interesting, isn't it? Interesting news in Christendom. Take care, everybody.